I'm going to show you how to set up your new GoPro Hero12 Black for the most cinematic settings for video. Now when I'm saying cinematic settings, pretty much all I'm talking about is kicking this thing into pro mode and then switching shutter speed to double frame rate. But I'll show you the entire steps along the way in order to do that. So the first thing you're going to want to do is go into the menu off the top, and you need to change the preferences from easy controls to pro controls, and that's going to unlock a few more features in the resolution settings. So once I do that, I'm going to be able to see a little bit more information on the shooting mode down below, and I'm going to go ahead and click into the first mode, which is standard stock, and then you're going to click on the little edit button, and now you've unlocked all of the advanced settings to set up for video. Resolution, you set whatever resolution you want, and then also set whatever frame rate you want. I like to do 5.3K, 30 frames per second. Hyper smooth on is perfect. And then we're gonna scroll down to a Pro Tune. Make sure 10-bit color is on. That's gonna capture the most color depth that this camera possibly can. Bit rate, you gotta switch it up to high. And then here's where you hit into shutter speed. And this is gonna be a ratio dependent on wherever you set your frame rate to. So I set this one to 30 frames per second. Another popular one for cinema is 24 frames per second. So you want your shutter speed to be double the frame rate. So if it's at 30 frames per second, we're gonna set shutter to 1/60th. And if it's at 24 frames per second, we're gonna set shutter to 1/50th. And at that ratio of frame rate to shutter speed, that's referred to the 180-degree rule of motion. And basically what that's saying is at those levels, you're going to portray motion the same exact way in camera as you perceive it in real life. So in real life, our brains process motion by blurring motion. So as you're waving your hand, like you look right in front of it, you can see it's blurring. And this camera right here is actually shooting at 180-degree rule too, so it's presenting motion in the same way. Now, if you have shutter speed really, really high at like 1/8000th or 1/4000th, you're not gonna have any blur motion, and it's gonna look a little different, a little bit jittery on the camera. So this is why we're shooting at that ratio of shutter speed to frame rate. Moving on to the next setting here, we have white balance, and you can go either way on this one. You could leave it on auto, and the white balance on the camera is pretty good. Or you can lock it off. I usually like to lock it off, just keep everything consistent. So that depends on where you're filming. If you're filming indoors, that white balance is gonna be set a little bit lower. If you're filming outdoors, you're gonna be in the 5,000 to 5,600 range. If you don't quite understand white balance yet, just throw it in auto and the camera's gonna take care of most of it for you. Next up, ISO minimum. So this is you're gonna wanna set this at 100, and then the maximum I like to set at 400. That means the camera's not gonna swing over 400 ISO. It can get a little bit grainy over 400, usually 800 is okay, but I like to keep it at 400 to ensure the video is gonna be super clean across the board. This is also really cool that the GoPro does, because you can lock shutter speed at 1/60th, throw your ND filter on if you're filming outdoors, and the camera is just basically gonna bounce in between 100 and 400 ISO as you're filming. So it's gonna exposure balance everything, so you don't have to worry too much about swapping ND filters out all the time. Generally, if it's bright out, you can throw an ND32 because you're filming at such a slow shutter speed. If you don't have that ND filter on, it's gonna be severely overexposed. And once you throw the ND filter on, the ISO is gonna take care of any exposure changes when you have that filter on. Sharpness, I like to leave at medium. Depending on how much you like to grade your stuff in post, you could drop it down to low and really just capture as flat as possible, but generally I'll put it in medium. The main goal here is to just basically get shutter speed in the sweet spot. Next up, we have color profile, and I usually like to leave this one in flat actually, and that just gives you a little bit more latitude in post if you're trying to color match another camera or footage from the sky from a drone. It just gives you a little bit more range of how you can match this footage to your other cameras on the shoot as well. And then next up, raw audio. If you're shooting raw audio, obviously you want this thing high. Wind doesn't really affect video quality, so you can, however you like to set that up. And that's pretty much it. So we just set one of these up. You can rename all these in the app and everything. And then I also want to go through setting up a slow-mo preset for you guys. So we're gonna click into the edit button on the ultra slow-mo, And I'm gonna actually leave it at 2.7K so we can hit that 240 frames per second, which is really crazy when you slow it down. It looks epic. Lens doesn't matter, that's gonna be whatever you wanna shoot. Hyper smooth we can leave on. And then we're gonna go down to the Pro Tune settings. The only thing you can really change in here is bit rate, and we're obviously gonna wanna bump that up to high, and that's just gonna capture the most detail that this camera possibly can, which is what we want. We're looking for cinematics, the best that we possibly can get. All right, so for shutter speed, we're gonna take it out of auto. Remember, we're shooting at 240 frames per second, so that means our shutter speed's gonna be 1/480th. And remember, when you're shooting at this shutter speed, outside, you're probably only gonna need about an ND8 filter to take care of exposure compensation. Indoors, you're probably actually gonna be pushing your ISO range a little bit higher. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave the ISO range at 100 minimum, but I'm gonna go ahead and give it 800 ISO on this one, just in case you're filming indoors. It'll take care of it for you and you'll get that little bit extra stop of exposure. Sharpness, same thing as before, just gonna leave it at medium. If you wanna put it in low, you can put it in low if you're trying to grade stuff in post. Color profile, definitely going to flat again, just like the previous settings, and everything else is gonna be exactly the same. So that's how you set up your slow-mo preset. So to summarize here, all we're really trying to do is change a few of the settings to get more detail, more color depth, more bit rate out of this camera than it comes with when it ships to you, but also just making sure your shutter speed is double your frame rate. Every single feature, 99.9% of feature films shoot at this. Pretty much anyone getting paid to shoot shoots at this ratio, and that's because it blurs motion exactly the same way we perceive it in real life, creating that not even really a cinematic look, it's almost just a more natural look, and it's a lot less jarring than shooting at higher shutter speeds. So that'll set your Hero12 Black up with cinematic settings, and remember, if you are shooting outdoors, you will need ND filters, and of course we sell the most epic ND filters. You can buy them on GoPro's site, or you can buy them on our site as well. That'll help you achieve proper exposure when you're shooting outdoors at the 180-degree rule of shutter. If you have any questions, drop a comment below. Happy to answer them. We'll see you on the next one.